Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
What's up guys, I'm Andy from 1A Auto. Today I'm going to show you how to replace the front struts in this 2008 Chevy Silverado. If you need these parts or other parts for your vehicle, click the link in the description and head over to 1AAuto.com. I'm going to take a 22mm socket. I'm just going to take this center cap off, loosen up these plastic covers. If you have to use a ratchet, you can use a ratchet. Pull that off. Take my same 22mm socket and a breaker bar. I'm going to loosen up these lug nuts. Now we're going to raise and support the vehicle. We're using a 2-post lift. If you're doing this at your house, you can use a jack and jack stands. I'll remove these lug nuts. Now I'll take the last lug nut off. Take the wheel off. We're going to take some rust penetrant. We're just going to spray it on this sway bar link. We're also going to spray some on our lower shock bolts, right there and right there. We're going to take a 15mm wrench, slide it over the nut, then I'm going to use a 15mm socket and a ratchet for the lower, and loosen this up. This is on there pretty tight, so now I'm going to use a ratchet wrench. Once it's cracked free, it'll be a little bit quicker. Loosen up this nut. Take that nut off. Rubber bushing right here. I'm just going to take it off with a trim tool. Just try to pry underneath here. Pry that out, slide that off, spray some more rust penetrant in there. Let that soak for a little bit. Just gonna take some locking pliers, just lock this right here. Try to turn with the 15mm socket and ratchet. Try to turn the bolt. It's pretty rusty. Right now it's frozen in the middle there. It's not turning very well. Just trying to turn it back and forth. So because this sway bar link is frozen against, it's frozen to the bolt that's going through it because of the rust. New England, it's pretty rusty here. I had to disconnect the other sway bar link from the other side so I can actually move this sway bar. I'll just take a pry bar, just get underneath here, and pry up, just to get that off. Then I can take a trim tool. I'm going to start by taking this rubber grommet off, just slide up underneath here. Just like that. Pry that off. And this plastic piece is pretty stuck in there, so I'm actually going to cut it off. I'm actually going to use an air-powered cutoff wheel. We're going to slice down the side of this link right here. It is plastic, so it should cut pretty easily. I just sliced it down the center, and I can take a trim tool or a straight blade screwdriver, just try to pry this apart a little bit. Normally you wouldn't have to do this if this wasn't so rusted. This rod, the bolt should slide right down, but this one's pretty bad. I'm just going to take a smaller pry bar and a hammer. You could use a chisel. Just try to bang this up a little bit. It's okay if I break it more because we're not reusing it. There we go, it's starting to move. Slide that off. And just take this other rubber grommet off. Slide the bolt out. I'm going to take some rust penetrant. I'm just going to spray them on these two bolts coming through for the bottom of the strut. Then I'm going to take a 15mm socket and a ratchet. I'm going to take these two bottom bolts out. Pull those bolts out. Because we separated this link, this makes this lower control arm pretty loose. It's going to make it easier to take this strut out. You don't have to take that link off, it just makes it a lot easier. All right, next I'm just going to use a trim tool. There's a little wire harness right here that's on one of the studs for the strut. So just get underneath there. Most of this is easiest to get from under the hood rather than trying to finagle your hands in between the wheel housing. Pull that off. Get that out of your way. We're going to take a 18mm socket. I'm just going to use a ratchet. I'm going to take these nuts off. There's 3 of them. One here, one over here, and then one over here. Loosen these up and take these off. One thing you want to keep in mind, do not take the nut off in the center. That's for the strut itself. And take that last nut off. All right, now I'm just gonna push down on this whole front end assembly, push the bottom part down, and then grab the spring and pull it straight up. Here's our old spring and strut assembly. Here's our new spring and strut assembly from 1aauto.com. As you can see, the upper strut mount is the same. The new one actually comes with new nuts. The spring is the same. It's got a boot. It's got a bumper inside the boot. The base is the same. It's the same height. Comes with new bolts and nuts for the bottom. Get yours at 1aauto.com and you'll be ready to rock and roll. Before we install our strut assembly, we're going to take these nuts off, set them aside. And when we go to install this, we want to make sure that the top of the strut assembly is like this, in this formation. These two studs are towards the back. This one's coming forward. And you can see that the strut is in this formation in the front. If you look at this from the side a little bit, this is angled, and you want this angled in this direction, not this direction, because that's going against the lower control arm. So we'll take this, slide this in. You're going to go through the hole in the lower control arm. We're going to go up. Line those holes up. Then I'm going to push down on the suspension. Then just get that to rest right there. And we can go up top and put our nuts on from up top. Now we're going to install these nuts. Now the new nuts happen to be 15 millimeter. So I'm going to use a 15 millimeter socket and a ratchet. Tighten these down with a ratchet first before I torque them. Now we're going to use a torque wrench and the 15 millimeter socket. We're going to torque these nuts to 37 foot-pounds. That's good. Now we'll take this wire with that fastener and reposition that on that stud. We're going to install these bolts down below. You're going to want to pull this control arm down a little bit. Slide this strut over. You can use a pry bar. Just get it into position. You could also do this before you tighten up the nuts on top. Make it a little bit easier. Line this one up. That's through, take the nut, put the nut on top. Do the same with the other side. You can give it a little tap with a hammer if you have to. Put the nut on top. I'll take a 15 millimeter wrench on top on the nut, and then a 13 millimeter socket and a ratchet for the bolt on the bottom. We'll tighten these up. I'm going to put a 15 millimeter socket on the nut, and I'll use a 13 millimeter wrench on the lower bolt. I'm going to use a torque wrench and torque these to 37 foot-pounds. I'm going to install this sway bar link. Just take this apart. I'm going to take the nut off, take this bushing off. I'm going to slide this apart. This centerpiece should stay together like that. Line this up with the hole right there. Line the stud all the way through the center. Slide the bar down. Pull that into position. To help with installing this, I'm just going to use a pry bar. Just go underneath the frame, slide it down. Then I'll take this upper grommet, push that on. So with the pry bar prying down, get the nut started. Once that's started, we can remove the pry bar. I'm going to use a 15 millimeter wrench. Just put it on that nut up top, and then a 15 millimeter socket and a ratchet on the bottom. Depending on the sway bar link itself, your sizes might be different. tighten this down. All right, then we're gonna torque this. We can just, I'm gonna switch, I'm gonna use the wrench on the bottom to torque the nut. We're gonna torque the nut to 17 foot-pounds. All right, grab the tire, line it up, install the lug nuts. Now we're gonna lower the vehicle down to the ground just so the tire is just touching the ground. Now I'm going to use a 22mm socket and a torque wrench. I'm going to torque these lug nuts to 140 foot-pounds. I'm going to do it in a cross pattern so that it tightens the wheel down evenly. Now I'm going to recheck it. Now I'll install the center cap, and I'll use my socket and just tighten these little caps down. Not too tight, they are plastic.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at oneauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.